Okay, so for the next part of the video, we're going to talk about adding, subtracting, and multiplying radicals. So we start here with addition and subtraction. So we have some addition and subtraction here. None of my radicals are alike, so I look at these radicals and say to myself, I go through and I simplify each one of these to see if any of them are alike. It's just kind of hiding from us. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to put a 1 right here just to remind myself this is a -1. The radical 6 can be simplified, so I kind of leave that alone. My next one is my 45. So I simplify 45. 45 divided by 3 is 15. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I have a pair of 3's. So I'm going to start out. So we have our -1 radical 6. -3 times 3 radical 5. So I already know that I can't combine the first two. And then I look at my 96 and simplify my 96. 96 divided by 2 is 48. 48 divided by 2 is 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And so I go through. I have 2 pairs of 2s, so I don't forget I already have a 2 on the outside. Then I take out 2 2's. What I'm left on the inside is a 2 and a 3. Okay, so I simplify these separately. So I have -1 radical 6 minus 9 radical 5 plus 2 times 2 times 2 is not 6, it's 8, so just be careful there. 8 radical 6. What I notice is I have the square root of 6 and the square root of 6. 8 plus -1 is 7. So I have 7 radical 6 minus 9 radical 5. And there's my final answer. Okay. 19. Very similar to that. I already know that I'm not going to be able to combine the 3, the 4's, but it does say simplify, so I need to make sure I simplify each of these anyway. So I start out with my 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I'm looking for a set of 3, so on the outside, this is going to be 2 cubed root 3. Really need to do a better job with those 3's. I know I'm going to have a -2 on the outside of the next one. I simplify 112. So 112 divided by 2 is 56. 56 divided by 2 is 28. 28 divided by 2 is 14. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And I have a 2 that I can bring out because I have one set. 4 2's, and I'm left with a 7 on the inside. Last one, I just have a 7 here, so this is going to be 3 4th root 7. So I rewrite this. So, ooh, excuse me, sorry about that. Okay, this is going to be 2 times the cubed root of 3 minus 4 times the 4th root of 7. Ooh, I keep touching the screen, and it keeps thinking. There we go. And then plus 3 4th root 7. I notice that I can combine the -4 and the +3. So this is 2 cubed root of 3 minus 1 4th root of 7. And you don't have to have the 1 there. You can just have -4th root 7. That'll work as well. So that's addition and subtraction for you. Moving on to number 20. Number 20, I notice, we kind of talked about this, we have the same root here and here, so I can actually go through and multiply these across. I'm going to get rid of this. There we go. Okay, so the cubed root, I know it's going to be a -12 times 4. I have 4 x's, 2 x's, 1 y, and 2 y's. Okay, so everything went under the cubed root. So this ends up being the cubed root of negative 12 times 4 is negative 48. And then I have x to the fourth and x squared, so I'm multiplying a total of 6 x's here, and then I have 3 y's. So I simplify. My negative 48, I know when I simplify a negative and it's a cubed root, I take a negative 1 out. Then I simplify 48. 48 divided by 2 is 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I'm looking for a set of 3 numbers. So I have a set of 3 2's there. So I can take a 2 out. My x to the 6, well, that's x cubed and x cubed. So I have 2x cubed, so this is going to be x squared. And I have y cubed, which is a set of 3 y's. So I have a y here. So the only thing that's actually going to be left on the inside is the 2 and the 2 times a 3. And so I end up with negative 2 x squared y radical 6. And that's my final answer for that one. Number 21, there are two things going on. I see parentheses, which tells me then I have to do distributive property. And then this is on the outside. That's not part of the parentheses, so I'm going to have to subtract later on if I can. So the first thing I do is distributive property. I have a radical 18 and a 5. I cannot combine anything. I can't combine the radical 5 and the 18, so I leave it as multiplication, and this is just going to be, I leave it as 5 times radical 18. Now, the next one, I have the 18 and the 2, and they are both in the radical. Okay, so I can multiply. This is going to be radical 18 times 2 minus 11 radical 2. So I multiply that out. This is 5 radical 18 minus radical 36 minus 11 radical 2. Okay, I look through just to see if I can simplify. Well, 18 divided by 2 is 9, divided by 3 is 3, divided by 3 is 1. So I know I can take a 3 out, so this is going to be 5 times 3. What's left inside is a 2. The square root of 36, I know, is 6 minus 11 radical 2. I multiply the 5 and the 3, that's 15 radical 2 minus 6 minus 11 radical 2. What I notice is I have radical 2 here and radical 2 here, so I have the same radical, so I can combine them. So I end up with 4 radical 2 minus 6, and that's my final answer. Okay. 22 is a little bit different. You can either do FOIL or the box. Since many of you are very comfortable with the box, I'm actually going to use the box method. So I'm going to make a box here for my multiplication. I'm going to have radical 3 and radical 6 on one side, 2 radical 3 and negative 5 radical 6 on the other. And I go through and multiply my boxes, but using the same method. Inside, inside, and outside times outside. So remember that there are ones if there's no number written on the outside. So this is 2 times 1 is 2, and then I have radical 3 times radical 3, that's going to be radical 9. 2 times 1 is 2. Radical 3 times radical 6 is radical 18. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. Radical 6 times radical 3 is radical 18. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, and radical 6 times radical 6 is radical 36. Now you can do any simplification if you realize that things can be simplified beforehand. I'm just going to write it out. So what I have is 2 times radical 9 minus 5 times radical 18 plus 2 times radical 18 minus 5 times radical 36. So our first step here is always to simplify. So I have 2 times radical 8 or radical 9. So that ends up being, well, the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, I move on to my next radical, which is 18. Let's see if 18 can be simplified, which we know from a previous problem. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I know I'm going to have a 3 on the outside, radical 2. Same thing can be said for the next one. I know that there's going to be a 3 on the outside, radical 2. And the last one, I have a 5 here. The square root of 36 is 6. So we end up with a 6 minus 15, radical 2, plus 6, radical 2, minus 30. What you'll notice is I have some plain old numbers here. 6 minus 30 is negative 24. And these both have radical 2, so negative 15 radical 2 plus 6 radical 2 is going to be negative 9 radical 2. And there you go. Number 23, it's only a tricky question. It's actually the same as 22, but what you have to remember is, and we've gone over this quite a few times, is that this is actually radical 5 minus 2 times radical 5 minus 2. Okay, so you can't just distribute that squared because there's addition or subtraction. In this case, there's subtraction in there. So I do another box. Radical 5, I'm going to put a 1 there, minus 2, and then 1 radical 5 minus 2. And I do the same thing I did with the previous problem. 1 times 1 is 1. Radical 5 times radical 5 is radical 25. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2 radical 5. Negative 2 radical 5, and then negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. I write it all out. 1 radical 25 minus 2 radical 5 minus 2 radical 5 plus 4. Okay, I go through and do some simplification here. The square root of 25 is 5, and 1 times 5 is 5. I have negative 2 and negative 2, well, that's going to be negative 4 radical 5s, and I have a plus 4 here. The last thing I notice is that I have 2 plain old numbers. Okay, they're adding and subtracting. 5 plus 4 is 9, so this is going to be 9 minus 4 radical 5. And there's your final answer. So that is addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Division is actually a separate standard.